Hi all, welcome to week 4, Curbing Your Cravings. I hope everyone is doing well and they are enjoying our Energy for Life modules. I am just going to share my screen real quick here. And I'm already doing it. Here we go. Where is it? All right, perfect. So I hope everybody can see that. So we're going to go through week 4 module, Curbing Your Cravings. I love this topic because I think it's so interesting. I think so often we can feel that we are slaves to our cravings, and that, you know, salty or sweet or chocolate or things call out to us and we have no willpower to say no to them. But what's really interesting is that as dietitians, we frequently will kind of take some steps backwards with our clients, and we find that those cravings aren't just because the person has low willpower, or they really like sweet foods, or they really like salty foods, but more just about how they've fueled their body leading up to those cravings. And specifically, what foods that they're consuming, whether they're meals or snacks, or maybe sometimes it can be a matter of not even consuming enough. So I think this can be a very eye-opening process. And so I'd love to dive right in here to cravings. I would say the grand majority of people do struggle with cravings. Sometimes it can be morning, it can be that 2 p.m. lull in the afternoon, or it can be, that evening time cravings. Sometimes people will even wake up in the middle of the night to eat, which can be a really, difficult thing to try to pick apart and break. But sometimes those cravings can be just out of habit. Sometimes it's a matter of, I always have a donut in the morning for breakfast. And so your body gets conditioned to that, to where you start to think that, like, oh, I've got to have it. I've got to have it. Or maybe it's the piece of, the chocolate after dinner at night. Sometimes it can just be habitual, or you can just be kind of bored. Or, sometimes your body is actually truly hungry and it's asking you for more food, for more nutrition. So the thing is when those cravings are soon after you have eaten, it might just mean that your meal wasn't as macro balanced as it could have been, or maybe it wasn't sufficient. So when you eat a snack or a meal that's truly satisfying and it's meeting all those macro needs, it's going to actually promote that satiety or fullness, and it's going to promote that longer lasting energy. So last week, we talked about your macronutrient goals, specifically personalized for you. And we talked about kind of each of those macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and kind of how they function in the body. I want to take that one step further and break down those amounts into meals and snacks during the day. So I'm not saying that we need to count and calculate every calorie or every gram of macro that you're consuming over the day. Absolutely not. Sometimes it can be helpful, don't get me wrong, to journal and kind of track those kind of things initially, because sometimes it can really be eye-opening when you realize, my protein needs are 100 grams a day, but I'm only consuming 10 grams at each meal. So you can see, like, oh, wait a minute, this is not breaking down like it should, and I'm not fueling my body so that it can promote that long-lasting energy. So we want to first take that first step of really trying to incorporate each of those macros into most, if not all, of those meals and snacks. And the reason why is because each of those macronutrients will work in different ways to help you to feel full and satisfied, and also promote that blood sugar regulation, which can provide that long-lasting energy. Now, you might ask, I don't have diabetes, so why do I need to worry about blood sugars? Well, let's chat a little bit more about that. So blood sugar regulation is important for everyone. And our goal is to have that nice, slow and steady blood sugar increase after we've eaten meals. And then we want it to be sustained for a certain period of time before it slowly drops off. While when you, have that donut in the morning for breakfast, which let's look at, what is that donut made of? It's made of refined carbohydrates. It does have some fat in it, but really it has absolutely no protein in it. And the fat is not necessarily a healthy fat. Likely it's probably saturated fats. So what's going to happen is those refined sugars and flours, your body is going to burn those fairly quickly. It's going to digest them fairly quickly. It's going to cause that blood sugar spike, and then it's going to cause a pretty quick drop. It's not going to give us that sustained energy because it doesn't have protein and it doesn't have healthy fats and it doesn't have any good fiber. Okay, so it's going to cause that drop. And then what happens after that drop is then we're looking for that next little pick-me-up, because we get that sugar high or that caffeine high, or we have that short-term energy, but it's not long lasting. And when it drops, that's when we're going to feel sluggish and we're going to feel tired. So the way that we can prevent this is we want to incorporate meals and snacks that actually contain those quality macronutrients that slow that digestion and cause kind of that slower, less dramatic increase, and kind of a sustained and then a slow decrease. And that's going to equal kind of sustained energy. Those macros that we want are just like what we talked about. Protein, very, very important. Complex carbohydrates, and what do those contain? They contain fiber, as well as those high fiber foods like vegetables and fruits. And then we also want those high quality fats, because fat does help to make us feel full, and it also slows digestion. So you might wonder, like sometimes people will go on these very low fat diets and they wonder, why am I hungry all the time? Well, it's because, that quality fat plays an important role in helping you to feel satisfied. So starting with the protein. So there's a lot of really great sources of protein, both animal and plant-based. So even if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you can still really get some great sources of protein. It might be a little bit more work and you might really have to kind of think outside of the box. But our main sources of really quality protein are going to be meat, fish, eggs, those dairy products like milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, nuts and seeds, and beans and legumes. So depending on what your daily protein goals, you could probably break it down into trying to shoot for at least 10 to 15 grams of protein in each snack and 20 to 30 grams per meal. But I want you to look at what did we determine your ultimate protein goal was last week in our macronutrient module. And I want you to break that down and get majority in those 3 meals, and then a smaller amount in however many snacks that you consume in a day. You don't have to have 3 snacks a day. You don't have to have 2 snacks a day, but it can actually help you to get to those protein goals without having to load up so much for each meal. So look, I have here kind of the list of different high protein foods. It's kind of estimated each one of these is going to be about 7 grams of protein in each of the servings. So 1 ounces of meat, poultry or fish is going to be 7 grams. 1 egg, 1 cup of cow or soy milk. That is not going to be your almond milk, macadamia milk, or those are nut milks, and they do not have the same amount of protein in them. Soy, yes, it does. And cow's milk have kind of similar amounts, but those other types of nut milks, you're going to have to read them because some of them are coming from carb sources, some are coming from fat sources, and they are not going to have the same amount of protein in them. A half cup of beans or legumes, so black beans, chickpeas, lentils, those kind of things. A half cup of yogurt. Greek yogurt is going to be your best bet for the highest protein amounts. A half cup of cottage cheese. Could be 2 tablespoons of like peanut butter or almond butter, or 1 ounce of nuts or seeds. So the high protein actually has been known to digest slower. It actually has a higher thermic effect of foods. So when you're eating those high protein foods, it actually, you burn more calories eating those than you do when you consume like carbohydrates or you consume fats. So it helps you to feel fuller longer, and it helps to stabilize those blood sugars and kind of help them to remain elevated for a period, and then just a nice slow decrease. So protein is that one ingredient that I recommend you always have in every meal and snack. So regardless of what you're having, I want you to think about, where is my protein coming from? Then you're going to couple that high protein foods with those complex carbohydrates. And I keep on saying complex carbohydrates because those refined or simple carbohydrates are quickly and easily digestible, and they break down into sugar. So even fruits, unfortunately, fruits are 100% carbohydrates, and they are more of a simple sugar. But when you're eating a whole piece of fruit, it's also going to give you some good fiber, and fiber slows digestion. So I'd much rather you eat that whole piece of fruit rather than juice, and always couple it with a high protein food. So the biggest difference between that complex carb and one that is processed or refined is that fiber content. So there's a picture of all those different beans and legumes. So complex carbs just mean it's going to be those kind of more whole grains, less refined type carbohydrates. The less processing that goes into creating that end product you're eating, the better. So when you're reading those ingredient lists, I want you to see whole, real ingredients, not all of these broken down or refined or sugar or fructose or all those things. I want you to be looking for whole, real foods like rice, potatoes, beans, those main words, right? So simple carbs, basically the difference in these different carbohydrates, the simple ones are going to have, they're made up of single or double sugar molecules. And this is all just chemistry. They're great for kind of those quicker bursts of energy because they're digested much faster. Complex carbs are actually longer chains of carbohydrates, so they take longer to digest. They're still sugar molecules. They still break down into those ultimate basic sugar molecules, but the process takes longer for digestion. So refined grains are just those ones that are very processed. So they're taking those whole grains, they're getting rid of things like the bran and the germ, the things that give them fiber and maybe give them some good quality fats. And they're basically remove those. And with that goes the fiber, there makes the body just able to really digest them quickly. So that's why we're recommending, stay away from those, because those can cause those blood sugar spikes and drops. And with that, unfortunately, can cause us to be a little less sensitive to insulin, meaning we're more resistant to insulin, and it can lead down the path of type 2 diabetes. So here I just have a nice table, kind of goes through what are some different types of simple carbs. Those are going to be like your fruits, your dairy products, straight up sugar, syrups, honey, things that are complex carbohydrates are going to be those whole grains, beans and legumes, vegetables, quinoa, buckwheat, for example. And those things that are the refined carbs are going to be like most of your bread pot products. If you get like those whole grain breads that have at least 3 grams of fiber in them, those are going to be a little bit better choice than, say, a white bread or one that doesn't have any fiber in it. But typically most of your bagels and crackers and cereals, like your white rice, and then your regular pastas. This is not talking about like the bean and legume pastas. This is talking about your straight up processed kind of wheat pasta. Those are all going to be considered more of your refined carbohydrates. Does that mean you can never have them? Absolutely not. I believe all of these things can be incorporated into a healthy diet. I think we just need to be conscious, number one, of portion size. We so often overeat carbohydrates. You don't hear somebody saying, oh man, I just can't stop eating those vegetables. I've been gaining weight because I've been eating too many vegetables, or even like too much protein or too much meat or too much beans. Like we don't typically overeat those. Why? They fill us up and we actually will stop. We're satisfied, we're full. With those simple and refined carbohydrates, unfortunately, we can eat and eat and eat and they don't fill us up. So unfortunately, we can overeat them. So doesn't mean we can't have them, but I recommend portion control. So whenever you can, say I'm going to have a half cup, or I'm going to have 3/4 a cup of the pasta or the rice or the cereal. And then I'm always going to have protein with it because that's going to slow digestion. I'm also going to always add vegetables with it because yet another thing, that high fiber, it's going to help to fill us up, make us feel like we're eating more, especially when we cut down those portion sizes of those carbs. And it's more of a macro balanced meal. All righty. So next, fiber. Fiber is basically in all of those plant foods. So we're going to see it in our whole fruits. We're going to see it in our vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, and whole grains. It is a carbohydrate that our bodies can't digest. So basically, I like to say it comes out like it goes in. And that's why it can be so beneficial when it comes to digestion and helping to keep us, from being constipated, helping to bulk our stools, because it's basically kind of our natural broom that's sweeping through our body. It helps to speed up the process of digestion. So it helps with excretion, but it also helps us to bulk those stools too, pull in some water so that it's not so difficult to have a bowel movement. And it also is very good for gut health because it helps to maintain those really good gut bacteria that helps to keep our gut healthy and strong and helps with immunity. So there's two different types of fiber. One is going to be your soluble fiber and the other one is going to be your insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber is one that actually dissolves in water and it can actually decrease cholesterol levels and it can decrease blood sugar levels. Some foods that contain that soluble fiber, and sometimes some of these foods you're going to see that they contain both soluble and insoluble. It doesn't have to be one or the other in a food, but it's going to be things like lentils, apples, blueberries, nuts, beans, and oatmeal. So you can see like people with Cheerios. Cheerios are made of oats. People always think that, oh, those Cheerios are going to lower my cholesterol. And I always find it really funny because Cheerios are such a refined carbohydrate. And just because they're oats and they have that soluble fiber, they promote it as lowering your cholesterol. Whereas I'm like, have a bowl of oatmeal, which is going to be full of fiber, less refined, and will still help to lower your cholesterol. Not to mention any of these foods are going to do that same thing as like oats. Insoluble fiber is going to be the type that does not dissolve in water. And it's going to decrease transit time. So it's going to push things through your body a little faster. That's why it helps with that regularity, but it's really important that you need that hydration with this insoluble fiber. So foods that contain the insoluble fiber are going to be those beans and legumes. It's going to be those great leafy greens like kale and spinach, the edible skins of fruits, whole wheat products, quinoa is a great source, almonds and walnuts, and then seeds like chia and flaxseed. So just for an idea, an average healthy adult should be getting greater than 25 grams of fiber per day. And actually, it's closer into the 30s. I can remember a time when people used to think that 5 or 10 grams of fiber a day was a lot. But it's not. I mean, there's so many wonderful foods. It's not just about like you can only get it from vegetables. You can get it from fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, and all of those great whole grains. So it's not hard to get to that greater than 25 or 30 grams of fiber in a day, but you do have to be conscious of it because it does mean incorporating some of these things into each meal. So some of these nutrient-dense, high fiber, high protein foods will actually give you more energy promoting nutrition than their lower fiber counterparts. So sometimes it might seem more difficult to bypass the donut compared to that egg and the veggie scramble, but I guarantee you will have more sustained energy and you will be feel more full and satisfied from those eggs. But last but not least, let's talk about a little bit more about why those healthy fats are important. High quality fats is kind of that last piece of this puzzle. So often I can remember a time like when I was early on and when I was a dietitian, there was so many low fat diets and people were so fearful of fat. And like I touched on before, they would go on these low fat diets and wonder why they were hungry all the time. They may not have been as conscientious of protein or high protein foods, because sometimes, especially those animal products that are high protein, can actually contain some fat. So they might have been, steered away from, oh, no animal products. So then you were missing out on fat as well as protein. So sometimes we associate that fat specifically to weight gain and obesity, high cholesterol, things like heart disease. But we forget that fat plays such an important role in our bodies. And it truly is an essential component to those sustained energy levels and blood sugar control. But the biggest thing is that it's the type of fats we choose. It's kind of similar to the idea of processing of carbohydrates, is that there are fats that are very, very processed, and they're not as healthy in our bodies. So the fats that they put into those foods that are hyper palatable and they taste so, so good are usually poorer quality fats. And they can sometimes be those trans fats, which are ones that we can actually say these are bad fats because they've been banned in the United States. Unfortunately, they're still in small amounts in a lot of different foods. But those kind of fats actually make you want more. So that's why you can sit down and eat that entire bag of potato chips, because of that salt, because of that. Sometimes if it's sugar or that those high quality or those poor quality fats, they just make it that you just want more. Unfortunately, they're very addictive, and they can actually increase that inflammation in our body, which we know is directly related to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and a lot of other chronic illnesses. So we want to decrease inflammation. The fats that we get from those whole real foods, especially things like fish and plant foods, are the ones that we want to try to consume most often. Fat, like protein, does not actually cause that blood sugar spike that the carbohydrates do, and it's slower to digest. It's not usually difficult to get in enough fat during the day. It's not like you have to consciously go, oh, I need to have another slab of butter or mayonnaise, because fat is so often in a lot of the quality foods that we consume. We have to be careful with fat, because if we are looking for weight loss, and at the end of the day, we're looking to try to get to that calorie deficit, those fats can get us there very quickly because they're more calorically dense than the carbohydrates and protein. We talked about that last week, because 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, whereas 1 gram of carbohydrate or protein is only 4. So you can see where that fat can add up a lot quicker. So some different kind of fats that are better choices than other are going to be those monounsaturated fats. So like extra virgin olive oil, fantastic for cooking. Typically, I don't use it at really high heats. Although now they're kind of saying that isn't as big of a deal as it was. But extra virgin olive oil, if you can get that cold expeller pressed, those avocado and cold pressed avocado oils, walnuts, peanuts, pumpkin seeds, and sesame seeds, all great monounsaturated fats. Foods that have those really good omega-3 fats, which are great for our heart, great for lowering cholesterol, are going to be those fatty fish like your salmon, mackerel, sardines, tuna, and cod. You're also going to get those omega-3s in walnuts and pecans, as well as in those chia and flax seeds. So if we kind of break it down, the average healthy adult, and this is, if you're a 6-foot-something guy who weighs 300 pounds, you're going to need a lot more calories than this. If you're a 5-foot, 100-pound woman, you're going to need probably less calories than this. And it also depends on your activity. But say we looked at about a 2,000 calorie standard diet, the goal would be to consume about 30% of your calories of that 2,000 calories from fat, which would be about 70 grams of fat a day. So as one point of reference, like 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 ounce of nuts, or 4 ounces of salmon is going to give you about 14 grams of fat, just to kind of judge where you're at and if you get in enough fat during the day. So now let's take a look at your actual plate. So when we were kids, I don't know if this was the case in your home, but typically, you know, we'd load our plates up with meat and potatoes. And then we might have had that tiny little corner where we had a few little pieces of broccoli or green beans, or maybe some corn, which isn't really even a vegetable, right? As now, kind of as times have changed and we've become older and wiser, we want to change our plate up, and we want it to look a bit more like this plate. Maybe in one corner of that plate, we want to have our high protein food first, starting with our protein, right? Maybe in another fourth of that plate, we want to have our portion controlled complex carbohydrate. The other half of that plate, we want to load up with vegetables, okay? If you want to add in a little dairy, if you want to have a serving of fruit, you can do that, but that's kind of those main components. You're getting the fiber, the protein, the complex carbohydrates, and you're getting those wonderful antioxidants from your vegetables, as well as lots of fiber, okay? So I just want you to, for this coming week, your homework is to actually pay attention to your meals. How does your plate look? Do you have enough protein in there? Do you always have a vegetable at least on your lunch and dinner plates? Do you make sure that you have kind of more of that portion controlled size of carbohydrates? You know, compared to an Olive Garden size plate of pasta, do you have more like a half to 1 cup of pasta? And are the carbohydrates you're choosing, are they complex carbs? Or are they more of those refined carbohydrates? Take a look at those, and I would love to hear your feedback. Send us a chat message. You can either send it to me personally, or you can send it out to the group. Let us know any thoughts that you have on how your plate looks, as well as our Curbing Your Cravings module. I'd love to hear if you have incorporated any things we talked about today, and if they've actually helped you with your cravings. Y'all have a great week, and can't wait to hear all about how things are going for you. Have a great day. Bye.